Hey guys, this will be our little section on urban ecology and succession. This is a really important topic just because urban sprawl is a really big deal right now. So, urban sprawl just basically means that cities are getting bigger, communities are getting bigger, um, and wildlife populations are getting smaller because of this urban sprawl. So, we're going to talk about that. So, before we really even talk about urban wildlife at all, we really need to talk about what the urban environment is. So, urban just refers to an area where there are high concentrations of people and man-made structures like buildings, roads, railroad tracks, things like that. But wildlife is still common in these areas because they still have to have a place to live. And the more we push outwards, the more habitat we're taking up, and so they have to go somewhere. And a lot of times they're spilling back into those urban habitats. But these areas are going to be dominated more by species who are able to adapt, because the ones that can't adapt go extinct or their populations dwindle. So some examples of wildlife populations that are adaptable or have adapted are like raccoons, pigeons, coyotes, peregrine falcons, jaguars, monkeys. So this isn't just in the United States. I mean, it's all over the world because urban sprawl is just becoming a really big thing. So urban succession, there are places that eventually become abandoned. And the forest or the environment around it takes it back. So you can see the picture over here on the right. This is an old railroad track, and you can see that the herbaceous plants and the shrubs and things are taking that back. Here on the left, you can see that there are trees that are starting to take over this old concrete area that used to be apartments, it looks like, in the city. And so when an area is abandoned and had been previously inhabited and industrialized by humans, it gives an opportunity for succession to happen. Okay, and depending on the level of industrialization, it depends on whether that's going to be secondary or primary. Usually you're going to deal with some sort of secondary because there's already plant seeds there probably, but if it's been a long time, you may end up with a primary succession. So wildlife in urban habitats, we live in Tooele. I'm sure you've down the street next to the old Tooele, or where the Tooele campus is. I've seen them there quite often. When I lived in Texas, we had wild pigs everywhere. You can see up here on the right, in the top right, there's some foxes here, and it looks like they're on the top of a house. So these animals and these organisms are learning how to adapt and survive in an urban environment because urban sprawl is becoming more and more prevalent in wildlife in areas, and it's taking up their habitat, and so they have to adapt and learn how to survive in an urban environment. So as urban sprawl becomes a reality, not just for us, but for the wildlife populations in the area, people have to learn how to live in harmony with wildlife because we are basically taking their habitat. And so we have to realize that by taking their habitat, we're giving them less places to go. And so unfortunately, a lot of these urban species have been branded nuisance species. Raccoons, foxes, wild pigs, coyotes, others have been branded as nuisance species because they get into our chimneys and they perch on trees and they poop on cars, and they're just scary. Like, who wants a coyote in their neighborhood? Your dog might get snatched or something. So it's important to realize why we've demonized these species. It's not because they are coming into our habitat. It's because we've taken their habitat and they're trying to readjust to what we've taken from them. So even though they may be a nuisance species to us, they are also still very important to that habitat. So it's important for us to understand that they were here first. And the further we push out into wildlife habitat with our cities, the less room there is for wildlife, and so inevitably they have to spill back into the cities. And they have to figure out a way to adapt, or they go extinct. So what are some ways that we can actually live in harmony? I challenge you to think about some ways that you've seen that we've been able to live in harmony with wildlife. We've got pollinator gardens where you can plant native plants in your yard or your windowsills to help pollinators. You can do insect hotels, which is what this is here on the left. They're just pieces of wood that people have drilled holes in, and ladybugs and bees, carpenter bees and things like that can go in there and live and lay their eggs. we've got some wood duck boxes here in the middle that have been put in the middle of an urban wetland. We've got bat boxes here on the right, and bats are really important to the environment. They reduce the occurrence of disease because they eat mosquitoes, and mosquitoes carry disease. Pollinate flowers so that we still have beautiful flowers in the summer. Our insects, so a lot of the insects that live in these insect hotels are actually predators of other insects. And then birds. Birds eat bugs, and they help control the algae in ponds. They help fertilize the ponds so that you still have pretty flowers and lots of really good wetland plants that are going to help soak up heavy metals and filter the water and help with the natural purification system. So living with wildlife is really essential because there are a lot of services that they perform for us that we don't really even think about. And so it's one of those things that we really need to start thinking about. So I challenge you to, as you are out in your communities, look and see if there are some wildlife habitats that you see, some urban wildlife, and what are some ways that you could come up with to help live in harmony with these wildlife populations. Because we have to share. We can't just take over their habitat because there's a lot of services that they perform that we don't even realize that they're doing for us. So when we talk about urban ecology, this is one of the things that we talk about is how can we live with wildlife? How do we help their populations? How do we make sure that we're keeping disease out of our human population? How do we do those things? So that's one of the really important things about urban ecology.